Giorgione is supposedly the man who put Venetian painting on the map, a big man, a charmer, a lover of poetry and music, and a great artistic innovator, but he is also one of the most mysterious people in art history. We don't know when he was born, where he died, when he moved to Venice, with whom he studied, how many works he created, and much more. You may have heard about works like the Sleeping Venus, the Castelfranco Madonna, the Pastoral Concert, Laura, and most of all his mysterious work, the Tempest. But which of these works were really from his hand, which were collabs, and which ones by different artists? The main source of information about Giorgione is what Giorgio Vasari wrote in his Lives of the Most Famous Painters some half a century after Giorgione's death. Vasari gives quite a bit of information actually. Only problem is that it is proven that Vasari doesn't always tell the truth. So ideally, this information is backed up by other sources. The general idea about Giorgione is that he has been very influential with his style and work on the future of Venetian art, most famously so through his close connection with Titian, who enjoyed a very long and successful international career. And so a lot has been written about them, but much of that information is speculative and has been disproved later on. There are some trustworthy records about the commissions received by Giorgione, whose name can be translated as Big George, but almost none of those works have survived. And so we are left with a big puzzle about what we really know about this figure. Estimates on which surviving works came from the hand of Giorgione range from just a couple to about 40. There are a couple of reasons for this uncertainty. First, he died in 1510, aged somewhere between 31 and 37, as his exact year of birth is unknown. By then, he was already a well-known artist in Venice, and many other artists followed his artistic style and ideas, making it difficult to distinguish between Giorgione and his colleagues who survived him. In addition, there seem to be several works that have been partly painted by Giorgione, but finished by other artists, most famously the Sleeping Venus, which you can see here. And yet another reason that is suggested is that he made quite some frescoes that have just not survived over time. So let's start by looking at the works with the biggest consensus that they were painted by Giorgione, and then we get into the more doubtful stuff. Giorgione's full name is Giorgio Barbarelli da Castelfranco, with Castelfranco referring to the town he was born in during the 1570s, and based on various sources there is no reason to doubt his place of birth, which is located some 25 miles or 40 kilometers inland from Venice. That brings us to the first work confidently attributed to Giorgione, which is the Castelfranco Madonna. This altarpiece was painted around 1504 and is still located in Giorgione's birthplace of Castelfranco. It shows the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus seated on a throne, with Saint Nicasius on the left and Saint Francis on the right. The painting contains three innovative elements, evidence of the originality of the works by Giorgione. The first difference with other works on this theme is the height of the throne. In these so-called Sacra Conversazione paintings, it was common to put Mary and Jesus on a throne, flanked by some saints, but the throne was only slightly elevated compared to the saints, as you can see in these 15th century examples. But not so in the Castelfranco Madonna, where Mary's throne is raised way above the standing figures. Another difference is the dominant presence of a landscape in the background, which is very uncommon in other works in this genre. The third innovation by Giorgione, though harder to see in this work, is that he did not carefully outline his paintings by first drawing every element, and Vasari referred to this as pittura senza disegno, meaning painting without drawing. Whereas the Florentine school believed very much in precise drawings and clear outlines in paintings, Giorgione focused on capturing a mood or feeling in a painting by focusing on the colors used. And when you first draw every detail with great precision, that distracts from capturing things naturalistically and creating a specific vibe. This idea will become clearer when looking at the next work. Unlike many other works, the mystery of the Tempest is not whether Giorgione has painted it, as there is strong consensus about this. The discussion is rather what it represents. It was painted around 1508, some 4 years after the Castelfranco Madonna. The simple description is that it shows a mother on the right with a nursing baby in a pretty unnatural position, and a kind of soldier with a pike on the left. Behind them is a city, and we see the changing weather in the background. There are several theories about what Giorgione wanted to show here. A first one is that it shows a mythological story like the birth of Apollo or the infancy of Paris, as there is a small stork visible on one of the roofs in the background. A second theory is that it shows a religious story like the finding of Moses or Adam and Eve after the fall of man. But neither of these theories have convinced the majority of people. So, could it be the unthinkable that Giorgione did not paint any particular story? That would be unheard of during that time. That he just painted some allegorical piece or even just a mood. If you look at the painting, it seems that everything is very quiet. But then there are the dark clouds and lightning in the background. I can keep on throwing theories out, but fact is that until today there is no consensus on what Giorgione wanted to achieve with his painting, and that is exactly what has intrigued people for the last 500 years. And it only adds to the mystery of this legendary artist. One more thing, the Tempest has been labeled as the first true landscape painting in history. You can debate this claim, but it was certainly an innovative work for the time and place where it was created. What is without doubt though, is that this painting is a technical masterpiece by someone who could paint really, really well. A somewhat related painting that is attributed by many to Giorgione is the Sunset in the National Gallery of London. This work has been damaged over time quite a bit and has various parts repainted, but shows similarities to the Tempest. It does not put out a clear story, and the landscape and atmosphere seem more important here. Another piece of work that is strongly attributed to Giorgione is this image of Judith, standing on top of the head of Holofernes. Giorgione captures the Israelite heroine Judith as a very pretty lady with a colorful dress in line with the emphasis on beautiful colors by the Venetians, and an idealized face showing a mix of beauty and determination. This work was painted around 1504, and we will see the idealization and beauty of the feminine figure back in The Sleeping Venus, a painting created some 6 years later, but one whose attribution is under heavy scrutiny. And if Judith would be looking straight at us, it could have been a face by Leonardo da Vinci, just as the type of landscape in the background appears in some of the paintings by da Vinci, supporting the theory by Vasari that da Vinci had influenced Giorgione during his visit to Venice. Honestly, I can see that this connection between da Vinci and Giorgione is tempting to make. But just the fact that da Vinci spent some time in the same town as a young Giorgione does not exactly provide strong evidence of the impact of da Vinci on Giorgione. Although there is some evidence that da Vinci brought some of his works on his way to Venice, including his portrait of Ginevra de' Benci. And it is thus not out of the question that Giorgione could have seen and have been inspired by da Vinci's backgrounds. One of the other paintings that is pretty firmly attributed to Giorgione is this portrait known as Laura, or Portrait of a Young Bride. If this is indeed by Giorgione, it tells us that he was also an innovator in portrait painting, as he did not really try to simply create a close likeness of his sitter, but more a mood or an expression. It is the only painting that Giorgione dated and signed, although that is also a reason for some to doubt whether this is really by the Venetian artist. Anyway, the painting appears to be in the style of Leonardo da Vinci with the use of the sfumato technique. And notice how the sitter is showing part of her breast, apparently not as an erotic expression, as this was accepted in Venice for public display, and it may thus have been just a wealthy and proud rich man who wanted to show off the beauty of his wife. Another portrait that may have been painted by Giorgione, although less universally accepted, is this Giustiniani portrait, or simply a portrait of a young man. This was painted around 1503 and is much more conventional, perhaps when Giorgione was still a student, and definitely much more traditional than his works from the next year onwards. But the attribution of this painting is much more doubtful than the painting of Laura, and we will next get a closer look at some magnificent paintings that have been attributed by some to Giorgione. I mentioned that the Tempest is the most famous work by Giorgione, but the Sleeping Venus is a strong contender as well. Only problem is that it is subject to a heated discussion about whether it came from the hand of Giorgione, a young Titian, or a combination of both artists, with the idea that Giorgione started the painting and Titian finished the remaining parts after his death. The traditional idea is that this is an original by Giorgione. But over the last century, opinion slowly shifted in the direction that this was a work by Titian. In any case, the direct or indirect influence of the style and atmosphere are strongly related to the artistic vision of Giorgione, exemplified by the contemplative attitude toward nature in the background, something not done before in nude paintings, and also the beauty of the figure. And whoever ideas this painting was, we do know for sure that the theme of the reclining nude has inspired artists for centuries to come. Similarly, the Pastoral Concert was originally thought to be a work by Giorgione, but over time more people have attributed it to Titian, even though no contemporary documentation proving one or the other. And these arguments are based on stylistic analyses. But as mentioned before, works of Giorgione and a young Titian are hard to distinguish. For example, the Pastoral Concert is another example of a work about which none or almost no preparatory sketches are known, and thus fits within the artistic ideas of Giorgione that detailed preparatory sketches or underdrawings would distract from creating a compelling mood and environment. Another work that is probably painted by Giorgione, but for which the attribution is still uncertain, is The Three Philosophers. The reason that it is attributed to Giorgione is that the interpretation is very ambiguous, and many interpretations have been suggested over the past centuries, with none of them having been fully satisfactory. Could this be a painting about the transmission of knowledge, with the old man representing classical knowledge? The middle-aged man at the center may be an Arabic scholar representing the early translations of these old types of knowledge, and the young man representing these writings becoming available during the Renaissance. Or is this an allegorical representation of the three stages of life: youth, middle, and old age? Or three stages of European civilization: antiquity, Middle Ages, and Renaissance? Like this, there are many alternative explanations, but what it has in common with the works we can attribute to Giorgione with a high degree of certainty is the painting style, the ambiguity, and the three men embedded in a landscape setting. Another highly debated part of the puzzle is who the teacher of Giorgione was. No official records tell us at what age Giorgione moved to Venice and who his teacher was, but based on the works he painted, the leading theory is that he was a student of Giovanni Bellini, one of the two Bellini brothers who were the most popular artists in Venice at the turn of the 16th century. Here's one of the earliest works by Giorgione that has also been pretty solidly attributed to him, which is The Virgin and Child in a Landscape from 1503, and this fits within the style of Bellini. However, according to Vasari, Giorgione quickly surpassed his master, and it was actually Bellini who was inspired more by the works of Giorgione than the other way around, even though Bellini was some 45 years older than his student. A related question is whether Giorgione was the teacher of the famous Titian, or whether they were fellow students of Bellini. As the year of birth of Titian is uncertain, just like the one of Giorgione, the best estimate is that Titian was some 10 to 12 years younger than Giorgione. So based on the age difference, it is unlikely that they studied at the same time, and given the early rise of Giorgione, it is not unthinkable that Titian studied with him. In any case, after the death of Giorgione, it was Titian who helped complete some of his works, most notably The Sleeping Venus, and Titian would further develop the radical artistic innovations of Giorgione. And let me give you yet another example of a painting that several experts, including the National Gallery of Art, attribute to Giorgione, which is the Adoration of the Shepherds. However, experts have also classified this as one of the earliest paintings by Titian, and several other Venetian artists have also been suggested. And so the jury is still out about this one, and quite some other works potentially by Giorgione. Another intriguing suggestion in Giorgio Vasari's book is that Giorgione actually met Leonardo da Vinci around 1500 when the latter visited Venice. Giorgione was the first Venetian artist who started using the innovative painting techniques known as chiaroscuro and sfumato, techniques strongly related to the innovations of Da Vinci, and Vasari suggests that Giorgione learned them from Da Vinci. However, there are also theories that Giorgione started to develop these techniques independently from Da Vinci, which would only elevate his reputation as one of the greatest artists in history. Whether you like the works of Giorgione or not, looking back at art history, he definitely had a big impact on its development, and his short career marked a major turning point, especially in the style of Venetian art. Just think about the many spectacular works by artists like Titian, Tintoretto, and Veronese. Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the enigmatic Giorgione, and if you did, please support the channel by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. And I always enjoy reading your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.